We live in a pretty comfortable world right now, compared to even 1,500 years ago. Yeah. Everything in our life is so comfortable. We just go to the grocery store to get food. Our homes are heated, everything like that.
Uber Eats. Yeah, 100%.
In America, we're so spoiled. And I think that this huge surge in rock climbing and endurance junkie sports right now is because people are looking for something to get out of the comfort zone, to really push themselves and feel fulfillment, because you need something tough in your life to really feel fulfilled and to feel accomplished.
Welcome to the Zero Quit Podcast, where we bring you inside the minds of elite athletes, business owners, and other guests. I'm your host, Covington, and through these conversations, you'll hear practical advice and effective strategies for building a more resilient mind. If you enjoy listening, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with a friend. All right, guys, so today we have on Reece Robinson. He is a filmmaker, outdoor enthusiast, and recently a co-founder of the Audacious Report. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing really well, Brock. Thanks for having me on. Super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like that's a perfect starting point, is the Audacious Report, because you just got back from Leadville, and we'll dive into that in a minute. But what is the Audacious Report, and what kind of kickstarted you and your co-founder, Robbie Ballinger, to start it?
So Robbie actually came up with the idea. It was bouncing around in his head for a few years. He has gained... Robbie Ballinger, for those who don't know, he's a badass ultra runner. He's vegan. He just ran 245 miles to beat a Tesla in 3 days, and he's incredible. He is now getting into mountain running, living out in Colorado, and he is really good at organizing events. Him and his wife, Shelly, they've done so many of these ultras. And so the Audacious Report comes from a multifaceted place of, let's celebrate people doing rad shit. There's actually a lot of coverage already about races, trail races of all sorts, road races. You can find a lot of media on those. But what about people doing events, feats of endurance that are not races? Robbie ran across the country. Yeah, and even stuff that you just come up with, like, hey, I'm going to outrun Tesla. Hey, I'm going to run all the tallest peaks in Colorado, do the toughest challenges in Colorado in just 2 months.
Well, dude, he's like the perfect example of, and of course it makes sense because, he's like the origin of it, but the perfect example of why something like the Audacious Report needs to be a thing, because there are just those insane individuals that are pushing limits, that are seeking out these wild challenges that aren't a traditional thing that's covered, that aren't a traditional thing that, you wouldn't have, let's say, a group of runners or people necessarily to sign up to do a Colorado Crush, right? It's a very individual effort that you have to plan, on a personal basis. And so, with Robbie specifically, he has those weird accolades that not everyone understands. They almost, each accolade needs an explanation. Like, what do you mean he raced a Tesla? What do you mean he did all the peaks, all this, that, the Colorado Trail, the Leadville, all in one summer? Like, you have to almost explain the feat, and once it's explained, the person's like, what the hell did, like, how does one even do this? So I think it's great that you guys have put together this, essentially a media outlet, and I'm excited to see kind of where it's going to be, down the road as you guys put together more content around it and really expand it and grow it.
Thanks. Yeah, we're super excited. We launched with our debut film a couple months ago. As you know, the Colorado Crush, for those who haven't seen it, if they want to get inspired to get out on some trails, check out the Colorado Crush on YouTube. And we have so much in the works, some incredible athletes and feats that are really mind-blowing, that I'm there and I'm just like, how is this person doing this? We can talk more about that. We got a lot coming down the pike that are, these audacious feats of endurance that are so incredible.
So recently you just got back, as I mentioned earlier, from Leadville. I was really upset because I was meaning to go to Leadville for the race, but then it was just funny that all these different things of like my life was all happening on like that same day. Like my wife's dad had bought us Colorado Rockies tickets like way in advance, and so we needed to be there for that, and then I had to it just kind of sucked, but I missed out on it, so I was jealous of seeing everybody there. But you just got back, and you were filming Hellah Sidibe, which most people If you don't know, you should look him up along with Robbie and the Audacious Report and everything like that. But filming Hellah's first 100-mile race, and of course it being such a memorable historic race like Leadville, what was that experience like?
So Hellah is just positive energy embodied.
Yeah.
He is probably one of the most positive, energetic people I know. And what we want to do is we're in the process of making possibly a longer film about Hellah, telling his origin story, telling the story of his transcon, and which he came up with kind of out of the blue. And he'd been running every day for a couple years and was just like, you know what, I'm running every day anyway, why don't I run across the country? So he's got this 5+ year run streak. He ran across America, and Leadville was huge for him because he had always wanted to do it. He had read Born to Run, and it was this defining moment where it was his first ultra race, and it was his first real experience on trails in depth. So it was such an honor to document him and watch him through that hell of a race. And you know what? He's an energetic guy, but he has also this incredible amount of discipline. He took his time through the race. You know, he started the first half marathon. He did 12.5-minute miles, which takes so much discipline. You know, you're starting at 4 a.m. with some of these best runners in the world, and most people are doing like 8-9-minute mile half marathon, and then, you know, of course they regret that. But he's an incredible figure because he's got this resolve, this discipline, focus, and he's got this positivity and energy, and I love how he balances it all.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because you said exactly what I get. I haven't met him, but I get that exact feeling through his Instagram, through videos, things like that, that he is this positive soul all the time. And sometimes, you know, it's always something you think about with people like that, like, are they really like that all the time? And so with this race, and I'm excited to see, you know, what film you put together eventually covering it, is I was wondering, you know, as anyone experiences during these ultra races, you experience a lot of low, stressful, fatiguing moments, right? And so I was wondering, is this going to put a little bit more edge to him? Is he going to get a little bit, you know, angry or frustrated, or have to dig into a different non-positive kind of realm for this race? So, you know, with him, and also in general with filming the Colorado Crush, you know, I know Robbie went through some rough patches. What is it like filming people during those wide ranges of emotions, especially those dark moments to where they probably don't even want the camera on them in that moment? They probably do want it later to look back on it. But in that moment, the last thing they want is a camera. They might even be questioning quitting, which would almost make the film in a way pointless to an extent. You know, what is that experience like?
That's a great question. I think what I specialize in and what I try and embody in my filmmaking is fly on the wall, verite, as it's called, observational documentary. So I try to start filming with these feats, you know, at least several days, if not weeks, depending on the event, in advance. And the sacrifice I make is sometimes I'm not able to be totally present as just Reece hanging out with these people, but I try and keep the camera around. I try and make sure that they forget that I'm there and get them used to me filming with them, because you can't really get an authentic reaction. You can't get authentic moments when people are really hyper aware of the camera. So I try and get it to the point where they forget I'm there. They're so used to it that they are just so focused with the people around them and in the moment. And then you can capture those really intimate moments that you couldn't get otherwise if you just pulled up and whipped the camera out.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, you know, that kind of ties into your filmmaking overall. You know, just seeing the Colorado Crush, I think, is like the main work I've seen of yours. But I'm excited to see, you know, more with which you've been filming now that probably won't come out months down the road, especially with what you just did in New York with, what's his name, Oz? That just
Oz Perlman. Yep.
Oz, okay. Oz Perlman. Yeah, so he just ran, what was it, 135 miles?
Just about, 135
just
miles
about,
in 21 hours, 52 minutes, which is insane.
Yeah. So with filming that only like, I think 2-3 weeks ago, give or take, and then this, how is it managing these different projects? And especially as a filmmaker, I know that the storyline isn't as simple as, oh, I'm just going to film it. And, you can piece things together and make a story in editing. But there has to be a sense of where the story is going, what kind of shots you want, how you want to interpret or present a person or a feat. How do you go about managing all those different projects, especially when a lot of them take, months to plan or edit or film in general?
So there's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is that the luxury with documentary filmmaking is that you do actually most of the work after the fact. So you try and get as much variety of shots as possible. You try and get as much as possible. And you can really piece the story, you have to, after the fact. There's only so much planning you can do. However, depending on the person and the vibe, the feat, that definitely determines the way I approach filming someone and their crazy run. Right now it's running. Mm-hmm. We're going into all sorts of different sports with the Audacious Report, but the running is the low-hanging fruit. But so for someone like Oz, he's really funny. For being a magician, you'd think he was a comedian. He's got this drive, this incredible competitive drive to succeed. And so that changes how I'm going to film versus someone like Hellah, which is he's really trying to, do this for himself, and it's an internal process. So for someone like Oz, and I think the film is going to come out more as a hype reel, high energy, highlights of this run to kind of convey the energy of running from Montauk, the tip of Long Island, for people don't know, the tip of Long Island all the way into Times Square, 130 miles. So my challenge is how to convey that. I was filming with him all the way for 21, 22 hours. How do I convey that motion, that movement over so many miles through towns, cities, countryside? And how do I do that in a way that honors who Oz is as an athlete and a person?
Yeah, it's almost like you can tell me if this is accurate or not. You're kind of building the story off the person's individual personality and vibe, as well as what the feat says about them or the goal itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So how many Red Bulls or Monsters did you go through trying to film something over that long of an effort?
What's funny is I actually get through it with adrenaline. I drink some coffee in the morning, but the thing is that I don't want to crash, so I actually don't really consume that much caffeine. I kind of it's a slow drip throughout the day. I'll keep, the cans of cold brew for people. That's the tip. Get cans of cold brew, and then you can just pop and drink them. But I didn't want to crash, and also caffeine, it's a diuretic. So it was 90 degrees in Long Island in the city in that day filming Oz, and if you're drinking coffee, you're going to be peeing that out. You're going to be losing salts, and so that's kind of I think one of the things you learn doing endurance events or whatnot. You're caffeine is great, but they're going to be way too much of a good thing.
Well, you know what they say, you can't come down if you just keep yourself up. So maybe that's the trick. So we talked about it a little bit before the show. So you just got back to New York. You're born and raised in New York. What was that experience like growing up in such a big, hectic city with so many big names, big things around you? How do you feel like that, added to your growth as an individual and also to your creativity overall?
Yeah. So growing up in New York was the best experience ever. Really grateful to my parents. Some people would maybe want more calm, peaceful upbringing. My parents were, corporate people, working late hours, lots of takeout, the classic New York lifestyle. And I think the thing I really appreciate about growing up in New York is that I feel like I can travel anywhere in the world and be comfortable because there's always crazy shit going on. You're walking down the streets and something's happening, all these characters and the incredible diversity. I mean, there are not many places more diverse in the States than New York. So I think that being here, growing up really exposed me to a lot of different environments that helped me be a better traveler and helped me connect with more people because I've experienced, a lot of different cultures, etc.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to kind of just get, especially if you don't grow up in a diverse, a busy city, it's easy to kind of get just stuck in your own individual town or even individual state. Stay comfortable, stay by, which makes sense, close to your family and never leave. But even in my experience with recently moving to Colorado, just connecting with so many different people, experiencing different cultures, what different people are into, how they dress, different things like that. I think it just adds and enriches your life overall and just makes you a better person in the end,
Absolutely. Travel is the spice of life.
That's right. And, diving into New York as well, something that you were a part of, and I'd love to hear more about what your role was, but the film, The First Wave from National Geographic, covering, of course, the pandemic that we're coming out of course, but, what was it like, and what was your role, I guess, with the film, and how was that impact with New York obviously being like the hotbed and kind of project, or what do you call it, patient zero of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget now. April, March 2020, it was all about New York. First it was Italy, then it was New York, and it was like, holy shit, everything is going down in New York. And we really felt the brunt of that early pandemic because no one knew what was going on. That was the key thing to remember, is like no one had any idea how the disease transmitted, how deadly it was. And so a couple weeks into the pandemic, early March, mid-March, I got in touch with Matt Heineman, the director, who I had been a huge fan of for a long time. Matt Heineman is one of those top-tier observational documentary, especially specializing in wartime films. And I had made his acquaintance like several months prior. And I quite literally reached out to him on Instagram via DM when he was posting that he was going to work on this film. And I was just like, hey, do you need a hand? I'm in the city and I'm here to help out. And it was all hands on deck for him. So within 2 weeks of this pandemic, he gained access to a hospital in Queens called Long Island Jewish Medical Center. That's Matt. He's just an access king. He can just get into any situation. He's embedded with the cartels. His film Cartel Land was nominated for an Oscar. So I jumped right into it, and it was scary, but it was also exhilarating because everyone was locked up at home, and I was going out to this hospital and literally in the belly of the beast doing what I love to do, which is documenting. So I was technically a field producer. I was doing audio, and I was also flying the drone a lot. I'm a drone whiz, so I was, all over the city. City. I was, capturing the city, capturing, ambulances, whatnot. And it was an incredible 2 month or two working on that film. And I really recommend people check it out. It's not an easy watch. It's a really important watch, and it's actually an uplifting film because it is a testament and celebration of human capability and resolve, really.
And that's one thing I wanted to ask too. With filming such a serious and pretty morbid situation, what was that like, filming something so different than something that's more obviously positive as far as someone attempting some feat? This is obviously a lot more of a dire and serious situation. What was that mentally? Because obviously, nurses and doctors have talked about how stressful it is mentally and kind of that trauma that they bring with them home. What was it being so close to, the chaos?
So the first wave is a celebration of the front line, of the nurses and doctors that were in the hospital, in that hospital in Queens, which kind of represents, a lot of America. And so being in there, in any kind of observational documentary, you have to be really respectful of who you're filming, but even more so. And at the same time, we couldn't hold back. We were there to document this, and I think the nurses and doctors understood how important it was. Like, it was quite literally like this historical record, I think, that the film will become. And so we gained the trust of these few doctors and patients, and I think that they would have no regrets that their journey was documented and shared with the world to see really what you couldn't see behind closed doors in the hospitals at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be an interesting way, but hopefully a way I can turn back to a more happy subject. But tying in kind of the idea of death, even with you being an avid rock climber, what do you think about those insane feats like Free Solo and Alex Honnold, and just those crazy things that they do?
So, we live in a pretty comfortable world right now, compared to even 1,500 years ago. Yeah. Everything in our life is so comfortable. We just go to the grocery store to get food. Our homes are heated, everything like that.
Uber Eats. Yeah, 100%.
In America, we're so spoiled. And I think that this huge surge in rock climbing and endurance junkie sports right now is because people are looking for something to get out of the comfort zone, to really push themselves and feel fulfillment, because you need something tough in your life to really feel fulfilled and to feel accomplished. And comfort is what we chase, but it's not really what will make us happy. And so for me, rock climbing is a way to achieve an ultimate flow state where you can't concentrate on anything else but your fingertips, the sensation of your toes on the rock, the sensation of the wind. And in this distracted world, it's really hard to get in that kind of flow state. And I don't ever think that I'm at risk myself, barring the catastrophic accident. But I think that it's feats like Free Solo, these films, The Alpinist, 14 Peaks, they're expressions of mastery, and combining mastery with physicality in this beautiful way that it must be so fulfilling for the athletes, and also happens to make a really damn good film.
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you were basically describing that resistance and kind of the endless pursuit of comfort is definitely what makes us feel alive. And I think, you could tie it to something more primal, to where, we don't have these comforts, and we're constantly seeking for food or shelter or just trying to survive, right? And then now we're in this modern world where, like you mentioned, we have all these different comforts. Most of us find ourselves in safe communities, safe housing. We have a police force. We have these different things that are kind of taken care for us. And, we kind of long for a little bit of resistance to almost give us that thrill, that adrenaline, to really, like you said, fulfill us and make us feel alive. So I definitely think, that's definitely what's driving these crazy feats, these crazy individuals. So you mentioned actually a film. I wrote this down because I was watching it just a few weeks ago. It was The Alpinist. And, I was watching it on, I think I watched the trailer first. Yeah, it is. I watched the trailer first, and then I made the mistake of looking at some comments. And I quickly realized that the individual himself, Marc-Andre Leclerc, died, not during the film, but, later on in a different feat, And, it made me think about, would you ever consider filming these feats yourself? Because in a way it's similar to, people pushing their limits in the same way that they would during these endurance events. But, with most of these endurance events, worst scenario, they DNF, or they could go to the hospital or something like that. But would you ever consider filming something like an Alex Honnold, or, something like a Nims, or, Marc-Andre, to where the potential for death is kind of right there and you're filming it?
Yeah, I think that it creates a really complicated ethical situation when you are filming something that is so close to that line of catastrophe. And I know that Jimmy Chin on Free Solo, he couldn't help but ask himself the question of, like, could I possibly contribute to Alex Honnold, failing just because of my presence with my film crew? And I think that ultimately, as long as you establish that relationship with the athlete and make sure there's open communication, I would love to film a feat like that where, you know, they're pushing the line. I think Marc-Andre had to really, in The Alpinist, he really had to be chased down. He didn't like to be filmed. But I think he was ultimately, at the end of the day, just like Alex Honnold, so in the flow that nothing beyond the 2 feet in front of them was on their mind. And I think that capturing that and sharing that is the ultimate form of adventure filmmaking, to be able to give that to other people as a gift. It's incredible.
Yeah, 100%, especially with those, you know, it is a fine line of, you know, this film needs to exist. You need to create and devote this, you know, attention to an athlete doing such a crazy, you know, feat, but at the same time you are nervous, like you said, that, you know, your involvement could lead to not only them not you know, achieving the feat, but you know fatally failing it, essentially. So you've worked with a tons of different people. We've mentioned that, you know, a ton of the successful individuals and insane athletes kind of you work with individual here. Other ones have, you know, been like Rich Roll, and I'm sure there's ones, of course, I haven't mentioned as well. Out of all the people you've worked with in different sets and things like that you've been involved with, who has left the biggest imprint on you, you know, kind of mentally or as far as your inspiration?
So it's gotta be Rich, because he has, I mean, I've seen firsthand the number of people that Rich has, forget about inspired, has changed their life entirely, including me. I mean, I've been vegetarian for a long time. And again, this is not just about diet. It's just about your inner core, your inner fulfillment. And I think he helped me really realize through his podcast way back. I mean, this is like early in high school. This is like 8 years ago at this point. He helped me realize through his podcast the empowerment that comes with taking control of your health and charting your own path and being fully behind that and being fully behind yourself. And so I was, you know, really blessed to be able to combine my love of filmmaking, which was somewhat, you know, fledgling and just growing at that time when I was in college, with my passion for health, right? You know, right, specifically through plant-based eating, just because I think that's a really easy way to get people to eat better if you're eating more plants. And so I worked with folks like Rich Roll, John Joseph, Nimai Delgado, these kind of really inspirational athletes who, if you see them crushing it out there, bodybuilding or running or swimming, and they're eating just plants, it's like, it's really inspiring. And I think that gets people in the door way more than any kind of fear mongering or, you know, chastising people for eating meat, like whatever.
100%. Well, that is one thing that I like, that neither you, Robbie, Rich, you know, do. And I'm happy to see that transition, because, you know, coming from a bodybuilding background, I remember years ago when different vegan athletes would come up, it was very fear-mongering based. It was very almost like the PETA approach, to where it's like, let me show you murdering a cow right in front of you, because that's going to change you, rather than, you know, educating and almost finding a compromise as far as, okay, maybe you're not ready to go cold turkey with cutting off meat from your life, but what can you do to either source more ethically raised cattle, or to incorporate more plant-based foods into your diet? And I think that's definitely a better approach, especially if your end goal is to convert more people in the long run towards a healthier, more vegan lifestyle. But health overall, you know, you kind of kickstarted a memory that happened, you know, a couple of days ago with my wife. We were sitting in a restaurant eating, and we thought about how this, you know, woman to a couple of tables next to us or whatever, she got a burger. She had taken the what do you call it, the bun off of the meat, and was kind of nibbling at it and rather just eating the meat. And she also got fruit. So I'm just making the assumption she was trying to be calorie conscious, right? and trying to remove some of the calories. And I was thinking about it, how my wife mentioned it. Most people have no clue where their calories are coming from. They don't know that maybe that bun barely has the calories, and swapping out the fruit, sure, it's better than the fries, but you're still getting like some calories and sugar in there, and that exercise overall and what you do outside of this meal is going to have a bigger impact. And so what I'm getting at is the average person almost has no clue about the realities of exercise, of the realities of food, of what they're eating, of what macros are, and protein and calories and things like that. It's a lot of myths and magazines and headlines that fill people's brains, and yet everybody eats food. Everybody has a body that relies on exercise and diet, and yet the vast majority of people have no interest in it, no passion in it, and no knowledge about it,
Yeah, when I was in college, I had already been a vegetarian for 4 or 5 years. I was a sophomore. I didn't really, thinking back to who I was before, I mean, honestly, I owe it to Rich and him kind of helping awaken me and the gazillions of people he does. I was eating for breakfast these egg sandwiches with like the Morningstar veggie sausage patties, and I didn't think twice about it. And I ate those for so long, and it really started to take a toll on my health. In addition to like it being cold winter, I went to school in upstate New York, and like my health was deteriorating, and I didn't even really realize it. And so it was like a light turned on, just like, oh my goodness, think about what you put in your body, and the nutrient density, and just, it's so important, getting sunlight, these kind of things. And I felt like I was like just totally ignorant, like a zombie beforehand. And it really made this incredible impact. I started getting into running, and I can't describe how impactful that was on quality of my life going forward.
Yeah, it's definitely like a domino effect of positivity and just productive outcomes in your life, because, kind of how we could point at the government and say, okay, well, the problem with the government, it's not just one thing, there's a bunch of things, right? Well, I almost feel like it's the same way with society, as far as, there's rise, I feel like, in conflict and depression and anxiety. And I do wonder, okay, maybe this isn't the sole reason or the sole solution, but how many people would be happier and healthier if they did, eat a little bit more consciously, eat a little bit more whole foods rather than prepackaged, if they drank an extra half gallon of water a day rather than just, Coca-Cola or different things, if they got outside and got sunlight, like you said, if they just went for a 20-minute walk a day, these different things can make such a big impact. And then when you remove them, you notice the impact. For example, you talked about eating some crappy foods. We all did. Like, I used to eat, these like Costco muffins in the morning growing up. Everyone probably had like those Little Bites packages. Everyone loves Pop-Tarts, right?
You don't think twice about it.
You don't. And, I'm sure everyone does, loves a Pop-Tart, right? They are good as shit. But I'll tell you what, they're insanely calorically dense. And even now with, running and lifting, I can fit the Pop-Tart in no problem and still, be leaner, have abs, figure it out, burn it off. It's not about that. It's about the ingredients in it. Your body is looking at those and absorbing them like, what the hell is this? This isn't food. This isn't good for me, And when you have, let's say some pineapple rings, or you have an apple, or you have, let's say, lean ground turkey, that's going to fuel you way better. You're going to digest it, feel better. It's going to be better for your body and actually be able to utilize those ingredients and nutrients way more than it is, some Fritos or, a donut or something like that. Like, you feel bogged down, you feel slower, you feel sluggish, your stomach feels bloated, and that's your body telling you, hey, you shouldn't be eating like this. And not that moderation isn't a thing, it is. But to your point, a lot of us, I did it the same just as you in your youth, just go through life just eating and not realizing, oh, this might be why I feel this way, or, this could change my life in a bigger way than I realized.
Yeah, the way that I found, advocacy in the most natural way for me is by joining forces with these icons, these plant-based crushers, and making video content for them. Whether it was, I did a ton of Rich Rolls vlogs back in the day. I created a cooking channel with John Joseph. He's this punk punk rock hardcore vegan dude who he turns Hell's Angels vegan, like Special Forces vegan, because he's just this guy, like this dude, you know. And working and Nimai Delgado, you know, this guy is like freaking huge using the game changers. So that's how I, you know, do my advocacy. I think that there's no more powerful way than leading by example and supporting these people who are setting the tone for what you can do, and while you're eating, you know, fruits and veggies.
Yeah, 100%. So what's next for the Audacious Report? What's kind of coming up that you may be filming, at least that you can disclose, or at least what should people be looking out for?
So we've got this O's Perlman film in the works, as I mentioned. For those that don't know, he's like an America's Got Talent finalist. He's a magician, mentalist, incredible mind reader. And so it's funny that he is also this insane ultra runner, and both come from this drive, this laser focus and drive that you need to do both successfully. So we got a film about that coming, a film about Hellah that's probably further down the pike. As I said, we want to make it something larger. And we've got some cool projects coming up, including this guy, Brian Reynolds. He's a double amputee. I actually just saw him in Leadville, and we're talking with him. He's looking to do the 7 summits, and starting with Kilimanjaro and Aconcagua. So that is something we're looking into filming. You know, as a double amputee, for him to be scaling mountains like that is just unbelievably impressive. And he's got, I think they were actually just beat, but he's got several like half marathon records for a double amputee running. And we're looking into a diverse set of sports: swimming, rowing, not just running, just people crushing it out there. We've also got, we are going to release soon Jack Greener. He's actually, I think he's worked with 10,000 a little bit, but he's sponsored by On Running, and he is a walking quadriplegic, which is incredible. After a jiu-jitsu accident, he was paralyzed, and he summited Mount Whitney, and there's a film made about that called Paralyzed to Peaks. And
you know what? I've seen the username now. Yeah, when you said Paralyzed Peaks, I was like, yep.
Paralyzed to Peaks. So we're getting the rights to that film about his summit of Mount Whitney, and we're going to release that on our channel. And he's such a kick-ass dude, you know, to be completely paralyzed and to be able to climb Mount Whitney in addition to all the other endurance sports he does. Really excited to share that soon on the Audacious Report.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out, especially for that O's video, because it definitely looked epic as I was kind of following along. So where can people find you individually, and also the Audacious Report?
So the best place for me is on Instagram at reece.robinson, RECE.Robinson. And the Audacious Report is theaudaciousreport.com, and the Audacious Report on Instagram. And we've got a lot coming. I should also say that Robbie is going to launch a podcast for the Audacious Report, and I think it's going to be such a hit. He's a charismatic dude, and so he's going to sit down with all these incredible endurance athletes doing, wild challenges. And so I'm really excited for the podcast to launch, and those podcasts are going to come out concurrently with films. And we're creating a little media empire here.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it, dude. Thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, I wanted to give a little bit of a little bit of advice, maybe to freelancers out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely, dude.
You know, I think this is something that I have a lot to say on, because a lot of people are asking, like, oh my God, how do you work with like Rich Roll or even Robbie and these kind of folks, or the first wave is picked up by National Geographic, and that was probably the most prestigious project I've worked on. And I think the key really is networking and getting good at being lucky. I know it sounds funny, but luck takes a certain amount of skill to be able to put yourself in the right position to get lucky.
Yeah.
You have to show up, you have to be there in a position where you can then ride that train onto that next cool opportunity. And so, as I said, with Matt Heineman in the first wave, that was a DM after I'd met him, right? But I needed to meet him first, and that was through a mutual friend. And for freelancers that are looking for advice on how to cold email, cold DM that person they look up to work with them, my advice is to start, just ask the person you admire to just tell them a little bit about their journey and how they got there. I think if you start out by cold emailing someone and you're like, hey, can you help me? I don't think it's as effective as just saying, hey, person I admire, maybe find a common thread. Maybe they went to the same school, or maybe they live in the same area, and ask them about how they got there. People like to talk about themselves. Ask them about their journey, and naturally in the conversation, it'll come up, oh, well, how about you? And I found that approach to work really well, and I think that can help a lot of you guys out there get some opportunities.
Yeah, well, 100%. It's something we touched on a little bit in like the second podcast I did with another entrepreneur, was talking about, a lot of people, they go about cold calling or cold DMing, whatever you want to call it today, a little bit the wrong way. You definitely need to, like you said, try and create, if you don't already have some network example or know a friend of a friend or have that kind of in with somebody to connect with them, you definitely need to come off more personable and ask about them, or come across of what you can do for them rather than what they can do for you. If you come at it like, hey, I want to help you film this, or you come out trying to jump in without creating that relationship and creating that conversation to begin with, they're quick to just delete it and ignore it. So I think you definitely need to, like you said, come at it in a sense with more humility and more interest rather than gimme or something like that.
But I think it's really important for people to understand, like, networking is so much more important than your resume, and it helps. You need to have a little bit of that experience, but it's all about who you know. In any field in your life, it's all about who you know, and just sending a resume into a big batch of other resumes is not really going to get you to where you want to go.
100%, yeah. And you reminded me of what you said earlier, because I was going to touch on this, was you hit the nail on the head about opportunity can be lucky, but actually seizing the opportunity is not luck. Like you having the necessary skills and experience to actually execute a film and do a job properly allows you to seize the opportunity when you email that director to hop on the first wave film, or you connect with Robbie because you have the actual skills and experience to actually seize the opportunity. It's not purely luck. It's being ready for when the opportunity or the luck does present itself.
Absolutely. And for the Oz Perlman film, my assistant and the photographer was someone I hired who had emailed me out of the blue like 2 years ago and was a fan because of the work I did with Rich Roll. And that we followed each other on Instagram for a couple of years, and I was like, hey, you live in Long Island, I'm doing a feed in Long Island, like let's work together. So it does happen. That's one of the advantages of social media. Social
media is amazing like that. I'm sure to have gotten some ignored DMs, but there are also so many people that I've connected with purely through direct message or pure, like you said, like networking and things like that, like connecting with you, knowing Robbie through 10,000, and some different people I've connected with just since moving here. I think people are a lot more willing to help others than it seems, off the surface level.
Absolutely. And thanks, dude, for your support of Robbie and I. You've been like our number one fan and
got the foam finger.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You're helping us, and I'm really excited to see where it goes, and I'm excited to share all these dope athletes that are just blowing it out of the water on their own terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate it again, and we'll catch you guys later.